Good morning. Thanks so much for joining us this morning. Our world from last week, which was crazy, and most of us would admit that, seems sane compared to our world this week. At a time when we are just so very weary of all of this. I was thinking about that, and I'm just so weary of the sickness, the death, the fighting, the arguing, etc. And it really just is so easy to think that nothing could be this bad. We think that this is the worst time ever in history. However, every generation has had those moments when all seemed lost and everything was just the worst it could ever be. And as humans, we tend to compare things. That's kind of part of our makeup. Even when we're buying something, maybe we compare two models, compare two brands of the same thing. Or we compare this outfit of clothing to that outfit. Or this type of food to that type of food. This political party to that political party. This sickness to that sickness. Our troubles to their troubles. And sometimes it seems that when in difficult times, we seek to make sure everyone knows that our struggles are the worst. It's kind of a human tendency. But I believe Paul, here in Romans chapter 8, towards the end of the chapter, is challenging that entire mindset. So keep that in mind as we go to Romans chapter 8, and we're going to start in verse 18. Paul says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed in us. For the creation eagerly waits with anticipation for God's sons to be revealed. For the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage of corruption into the glorious freedom of God's children. For we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. And not only that, but we ourselves who have the Spirit as the first fruits, we also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Now in this hope we were saved. Yet hope that is seen is not hope, because who hopes for what he sees? But if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with patience. In the same way, the Spirit also joins to help in our weakness, because we do not know what to pray for as we should. But the Spirit himself intercedes for us with unspoken groanings. And he who searches the hearts knows the Spirit's mindset, because he intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. We know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose." I want us to walk our way through this passage where we're not going to go as deep as we could. If we were going to go real deep, we were going to have to split it up some more. But to look at these 10 verses, we're going to look at what I believe is really applicable to the church today. If we look at verse 18 to start with, it says, "For I consider that the sufferings of this present time are not worth comparing with the glory that is going to be revealed in us." Remember what I said, as human beings, we tend to compare things. We compare things to each other. But in a lot of instances, and maybe in all instances, comparisons are not helpful or profitable. In fact, our present time, I think of that, Paul's using that present time. They were going through things that made them seem like all was lost. And that's how we are today. So, in fact, our present time, as awful as it may seem, is not worth comparing to what God has in store for us if we will follow him. The glory that God is going to bring to himself out of our present struggles surpasses anything we can go through. No matter how great our problems, his glory that will be revealed through us overshadows them all. And in fact makes them seem small in comparison. Verse 19 says, for the creation eagerly waits with anticipation for God's sons to be revealed. Think about that. Creation waits for God to be revealed in us. I believe that this world is waiting for the people of God to make themselves known. In a world and time where everyone is searching for answers, the world is waiting for the answer that we already have. Verses 20 and 21 say, for the creation was subjected to futility, not willingly, but because of him who subjected it, in the hope that the creation itself will also be set free from the bondage of corruption into the glorious freedom of God's children. I had somebody ask me one time about tornadoes, and that they just didn't understand how God's creation, something God had created, could be so horrible. And I think that we miss something, because somewhere there's a place between Genesis chapter 1 and Genesis chapter 3 where mankind made some decisions that forever altered creation. Altered it to the point that in our own humanity there was no way to fix it. It corrupted what was around us. And you know, all the things that we go through in life can bring glory to God, but only if we are not consumed by it. Creation is bound right now to a vicious cycle of sin and corruption that came into play at the fall back in Genesis chapter 3. But the releasing of those bindings is the responsibility of the people of God. God working through us releases creation. We hold the answer in our hands. When it seems as though all that we're going through, all that's happening, is destruction. That's what it feels like. Everything's just in some form of destruction. It's being destroyed. But let's look closely at the words of Paul here. He says, in the hope that creation itself will also be set free from the bondage of corruption. Creation shall be set free. Or if we want to use another word for that, will be delivered. Destruction is not deliverance. Therefore, whatever is destroyed or ceases to be is not delivered at all. God is promising deliverance, not destruction. So when it all seems lost, and it all seems like it's in some form of being destroyed, we must remember that God promises deliverance. And healing is here for all of that. And it's found in the reality of God and His Son, Jesus Christ. And then verse 22 gets interesting. It says, for we know that the whole creation has been groaning together with labor pains until now. Seems like an odd thing to talk about, an odd metaphor that you know, our groanings be compared to a woman in labor. And groaning with labor pains is a painful groaning. But it's not one that has no purpose. It's not a groaning that has no reason, because that groaning produces new life. There's something positive at the end of the pain. I've never had a child, but I've talked to many mothers who've had it, and they talk about how though it hurts, once the baby's born, you really kind of forget about all of that. And the joy of new life. There is a hope and a goal in our groaning. Verse 23 says, and not only that, but we ourselves who have the Spirit as the first fruits, we also groan within ourselves, eagerly waiting for adoption, the redemption of our bodies. Whenever we go through tough times as a world or as a country or as a society or even in our own, we see things and we think, okay, this is it. This has got to be the end times. God's got to be coming back. People have been saying that for every generation since he left. The first generation of Christians was absolutely positive that Christ was going to return in their lifetimes. My grandfather really believed that God was going to return in his lifetime. And it's because we groan. We groan as we wait for God's glory to be made complete in us. It's something we're waiting on. The redemption of our bodies, the time when all of these troubles will pass away. Verse 24 says, now in this hope we were saved. Yet hope that is seen is not hope, because who hopes for what he sees? Verse 25, but if we hope for what we do not see, we eagerly wait for it with patience. That's the hope that saves us. I want us to notice the description of the hope we see here. Because you see, there are times, a lot like now, when it is hard to see the end of the tunnel, the end of the troubles we are facing. We want to see the light at the end. And we claim that that light is our hope. But look at what Paul says here. He's basically saying if you can see it, then it's not hope. Because we don't hope for what we can see. We hope for what we can't see. What we can't see can often be what we deem impossible. We can't see that as an outcome, so it must be impossible. And in hoping for what seems impossible comes an eager anticipation. That we are actively approaching this thing that we think is impossible. Our God is the God of the impossible. He can do what we cannot even fathom. And we eagerly wait to see what he will do, because he can do anything. So you may not be able to see the light right now. You may not be able to see the time when we as a church gather together with enough food to feed a third world country, because that's what it feels like when we have a potluck. And you might think, well, we're never going to be there again. We can't see that light. Everything has changed. It's never going to be the same. And you know what? It might not be. But I'm not hoping for what I can see. I'm hoping for what I can't see. Verses 26 and 27, it says, in the same way, the Spirit also joins to help in our weakness, because we do not know what to pray for as we should. But the Spirit himself intercedes for us with unspoken groanings. And he who searches the hearts knows the Spirit's mindset, because he intercedes for the saints according to the will of God. Since we cannot imagine what God is actually capable of and what he can do, we often do not know how to pray for it. And there are times in life when we just have no words. We are broken. We're weary. We don't know where all this is going or what its purpose is, and so we don't know how to pray. Our understanding is weak, particularly in the things of God. Our desires are weak. Our prayers are weak. And this is where the Spirit steps in. He turns these groans into words. Stands before the throne and intercedes for us. He prays for us. And these intercedings, these prayers, are directly in line with what God's plan is. For the Spirit knows where all this is going. So when you kneel before God and you think, you know, God, I don't have any words to say, weep before him. Let your spirit cry out, because the Spirit knows where this is going. And he can intercede for us, turning those groanings into prayers and into words. And then verse 28 says, in the same way we know that all things work together for the good of those who love God, those who are called according to his purpose. In this passage, that might be the one verse you know. And all that we've just talked about culminates in this revelation from the Apostle Paul. And basically what that revelation is that none of this is pointless. It might seem like all the things that we're going through, that there's no point. There can't possibly be a reason for this. But listen to me, God has a plan. And his plan is good. That might seem oversimplified. But that is all we need to understand. God is doing what he needs to do for our good and for his glory. So in this time when it seems like any normal future or any future at all is impossible, we serve a God who does the impossible. And it is in this that we have hope. I know right now that it is easy to be discouraged. We're tired of being at home. We're tired of being sick. We're tired of watching people die. We're tired of the stress. We're tired of the masks. We're tired of it all. It seems so hard to see anything in the future that is positive. But it is in this and in the impossibility of the unseen that we have hope. For a lot of my life, someone once told me, and I've kind of tried to live by that, is if I can dream it, it's not big enough. If I can see it, then it's not hope, it's a plan. I hope in what God sees. What I can't even imagine, what I can't even fathom. Because God is doing something. I believe that with every fiber of my being. God is doing something. And he is doing something good. He is working through us to do something that will bring him glory. That's the point of all of this. It's not my glory. It's not your glory. It's not the glory of our church, the glory of a denomination, the glory of a country, the glory of anything. It is for God's glory and his glory alone. So to him, let us say today, to him be all the glory.